Persuading people to take the actions we want can be hard. Our teams and clients are bombarded with thousands of messages every single day. But there is a way for you to get above the noise. Stories. This is the Stories with Traction podcast, and I'm your host, Matt Zaun. Join my guests and me as we unpack the power of storytelling. We'll talk about topics like leadership, sales, and marketing, all through the lens of strategic storytelling. Enjoy this episode. Welcome. This is another Flip the Script episode because someone else will be interviewing me. That someone else is Matthew Scura from Edge of Cinema. I was on his Stories from the Top podcast, and we did a series on storytelling. This is a part of that series where we dive into why storytelling works. Enjoy the episode.
We are back once again with Matt Zaun, speaker, consultant, and host of the Stories with Traction podcast. Matt, thanks once again for coming back. Today, we want to talk about why storytelling works. So to start out, why don't you just give us a little intro to your definition of storytelling?
Sure. Awesome question. All right. So first, everyone listening, I want you to reframe your definition when it comes to stories, especially in business. We are not talking movie productions or Broadway plays where you are dazzling the audience. We are talking about very specific, strategic, intentional stories that get above the noise in people's minds. Okay. So when it comes to storytelling, the main focus should be ordinary world, new reality. So for those of you listening that sell a product, what's the ordinary world that your prospect's in? What's the new reality what's the new reality they will be in when they become a customer? For those of you selling a service, what's the ordinary world that your prospects in? What's the new reality they'll be in when they become a client? For those of you who are at a staff meeting, you get up at a staff meeting and you're speaking to your team. What's the ordinary world your team's in? What's the new reality they'll be in when they buy into your ideas? That is spurred on by the person you are heaping praise on in your story. That person cannot be you. Okay, so this is really important. If you want a group of people to be endeared to you, you can never make yourself the hero of your own story. It has to be someone else or sometimes something else. Okay, so what do I mean by someone else? A mentor, a customer. Customers make incredible heroes of stories. It could be a friend. It could be a former coach. Okay, so that's someone else. It could also be family members, right? Your spouse, your children. Sometimes the most powerful business stories are personal stories with business themes intertwined. Okay, now something else, it could also be a framework, a concept, a principle that you're heaping praise on this. You know, maybe sometimes you would say, hey, I did it this way for so long, but through trial and error, I learned this framework. And now because of the framework, A, B, and C is happening. But you're not focusing on yourself. You're not saying, I'm the man, I'm awesome, I have the best business in this area. Those are very debatable comments, by the way. You're shielding yourself from debate by putting the praise on someone else.
Okay, very interesting. So what is like the mechanism behind that makes that effective?
People are more endeared to you because you are highlighting someone else, you're edifying someone else. Indirectly, so for people listening that they are leaders of people, you are indirectly saying you're an amazing leader by propping someone else up, but you're not directly sharing that. You're not beating your chest saying, look at me, I'm this awesome leader, I have it all together. You're highlighting other people, and through them, you're speaking to here's what they did. You're the one pulling everything together. So often that person would be the position of a guide. The hero is the individual that they're heaping praise on. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's really, really important. I think a lot of people are just turned off by bragging. It's repulsive to a lot of people. Yeah. This is a way that you can very much highlight someone, but you're not doing the bragging yourself. So prime example, I'll use you as an example, right? You've done a ton of work for some pretty awesome organizations, right? So there's one thing of saying, hey, we have the best video outfit in Pennsylvania. Let's say you were to make that claim. We have the best video editing company in all of Pennsylvania. Highly debatable comment. Or you could share story after story after story of customer that you've helped enhance their marketing, boost sales. Maybe they use something internally for like a company culture type piece to create this vibrant company culture. It's very different. It's very difficult to blow holes in that argument, right? So now you're showing all these different stories of what you've done, the work that you've done. It's just such a powerful way to share stories.
Yeah, that's something we really try to push on our clients too, is we love I think it's Donald Miller's story brand.
For sure.
We're a huge fan of that. Like, no one cares that you've been in business since 1922 or that you did this many sales or you serve these clients. They want to know how you're going to help them achieve their goals and solve their problems.
100%.
So that's like always a big process. Every time someone has more of a specific message in mind, when they're working with us, it's always the first thing is how can we position this so we are not just talking about how cool of a business you are and how much success you've had. What are the problems that people are facing and how do you solve them?
For sure, for sure. And to take that further, there's really 4 emotions that I recommend people focus in on, because you alluded to pain points, right? Mm-hmm. Pain points of their prospects. So it is excitement, anger, fear, and surprise. Excitement, anger, fear, and surprise. If we get good at identifying and understanding those emotions are the launching pad for incredible story building. Now, when it comes to the fear piece, if we're going to zone in on fear is a huge driver from a behavioral perspective. Fear is one of the most powerful emotions that a human can have. So when we are targeting a story at maybe a group of people or a specific person, we need to ask about the pain point perspective. So one of the exercises that I recommend people listening to this do, and I mean that sincerely, like as soon as this episode's over, go grab a piece of paper and start jotting down every single thing your prospect is fearful of. Now, under the umbrella of fear could be anxiety, could be hesitation, but write down every single thing that your prospect is fearful of, and or client, right? So maybe there's an upsell that you can have even with current clients, and jot all that down. And then you're going to be staring at a ton of topics that you can turn into stories. So let's say you really push yourself. You set I'd recommend people set an alarm on their phone for 2-3 minutes, and you're going to jot down every single thing under the category of fear in that time. Well, you might step back and you might have 17 plus things and identify 3 of them that are really good to build stories on. And then you ask yourself that question: what's the ordinary world? What's the new reality? How can I insert a hero into this? And you're going to start very quickly identifying different themes that you can pull together more of the details of that story.
So once you have your themes identified, how do you identify whether a story is working or it's worth taking out into the world and playing with it?
Awesome question. So I want to touch on this from 2 different perspectives. One, I recommend everyone doing an ICP/C exercise. ICP/C, ideal client persona and or community. Okay. So the way that works is you need to ask yourself, if you were to look at 80% of your clients, where do they fall within certain metrics? Okay. So first, what generation are they from? Okay, so I want everyone to pause and think about that for a second. What generation typically does your prospect fall or client that you have fall under? What's their education background? What state and or nation is dominant when it comes to where they reside? Okay, this is also key too, because I work with a ton of companies in the US, and many people listening know the Carolinas are different than New York City. Chicago is different than Orange County and the Silicon Valley, right? We have a ton of different cultural differences just here in the US alone. You start breaking down their job responsibilities, all the different things, every single thing that you possibly can to try to figure out who is the actual person that you're speaking to and or group of people. So that's one thing. I recommend people do that. Another thing too is, for the first time ever, from a human kind perspective, I want you to think of how long we've been on planet Earth from a species perspective. So for the first time, let's say ever, we're able to get almost instant feedback through social media. Okay. Now I know social media has been around for, quite some time, but when you really think about it, it hasn't been that long when you're looking at the entire human race and how long we've been on the planet. So it's a pretty incredible thing that we have at our fingertips where we can almost get instant feedback. So one of the things that I do often is when I put a story out on social media, and my social media platform of choice is LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. It's brought in me a good chunk of business. So I don't know if you want to get into a LinkedIn discussion, but it's pretty incredible.
That's my next question, actually.
And when I put a story out on LinkedIn, I'm looking for not that I'm asking for feedback, but when I do get feedback, when I get certain comments and I get certain questions and I recognize that story did better than most, I've identified that as a story that I should probably spend more time on. Okay, why was that received in that way? Okay, what emotion was identified? What's the story that's in that? What's the call to action? What's the engaging first couple sentences? So I'm breaking that story down and recognizing, hey, maybe I should give it more time to develop the story. I can't tell you how many stories. There's a ton of stories that I use in my workshops and keynotes that were developed on LinkedIn.
Do you look at who's reacting to it as well to kind of get a sense of, oh, this generation found this more insightful, or this type of business position was more inspired by that post? Do you?
Oh, absolutely. I think the number one thing I look for, because I primarily work with C-suites, is looking, is the person a CEO, right? Does the person run an organization? That's the main thing I look at right away. But yeah, generation for sure. Like, did it cater more to millennials, or was it more baby boomers? Like, that would be interesting to identify, right? Mm-hmm. For sure.
Yeah, so to kind of follow up while we're talking about LinkedIn, how do you think storytelling plays into the personal branding fad, which is gaining a lot of traction in the last couple of years? If you're familiar with personal branding, is where like putting value on yourself versus the organization as like a mouthpiece for the business, essentially.
I think a lot of that comes back to the authenticity piece of that person. I mean, there's a lot that someone could do to prop up their brand for sure. But I think, again, the ones that succeed the most in personal branding are not necessarily the ones that beat their chest and tout how awesome they are. They're just really, really good at uplifting others and sharing almost like vicariously through someone else. Here's what happened. I think that's really important to recognize, because people that are listening to this episode, you can relate that we are almost repulsed by people that are quote unquote braggadocious, right? All they do is brag about themselves. Look how awesome I am. Look how flowery I am. That doesn't work from an endearment perspective. So yes, personal branding is incredibly important, but we can't make it all about us.
Yeah, it's pretty much proving that you're an expert by any means possible, except saying you're an expert.
For sure.
Because yeah, I follow a lot of people. I recently unfollowed someone who had a big post where it was him shirtless, flexing his abs in the gym, and it's like, working out is so important. If you don't take the time to, and it was just like, I don't want to see this. It was just turned me off of that guy completely. It's like,
sure,
you're not offering any advice or tips or encouragement. You're just showcasing yourself. And it's like, that's not who I want to work with or follow. It's not interesting content.
So let me make a point about that. I think there's a really good example. So that would be good if that person had 90% of clients that were fitness freaks. Like if 90% of that person's clients are in the gym, they're telling, even if that person wasn't selling gym equipment or they weren't selling some type of new diet or whatever. Let's just say, I don't know who that person was, but let's say that they were a consultant and for whatever reason, they thought it was really cool to be shirtless on LinkedIn and flexing their abs, right? The story might work if the main makeup of that person's prospects and clients were really into fitness, okay? If it's not, and it's just for like clicks and the likes or whatever, that's not gonna bode well. For me, one of the things I do is I do regularly share stories of my kids with business themes intertwined. Now, someone on the flip side might be saying, I don't care about Matt's kids. Who cares? What does that have to do with business? Well, if they would read the story, they would recognize it has a lot to do with business because there's a business theme intertwined, but also 90+% of my prospects and clients have kids. So it's a great way to relate, to connect. I'm not just some random guy on social media. I'm a father. I have a family. So there's a lot of pieces that someone might share to repel someone. If they're repelling someone that's not their ideal client, then that's good almost. That's good in a way.
Awesome, Matt. You gave us a lot to think about and some actual homework. So for everyone listening, start writing down the fears you said.
Absolutely.
Yeah, get to it. Matt, once again, thanks for coming on. How do people get in touch with you?
So they can go to my website, storieswithtraction.com.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you again for coming on. We have one more episode coming up where we're going to talk about public speaking and how to engage an audience.
Thank you for listening to the Stories with Traction podcast. Please leave a review, since positive reviews will make it easier for others to find this conversation. Next episode will launch on Friday at 8 a.m. Eastern. Until then, remember, if you want to persuade with power and inspire those around you to action, you must share more stories.